leadership? Well, that's a very oft asked question and a theme. I think leadership is more about the ability to influence rather than just being in a position. It's about attributes of conviction, of commitment, of passion, of hard work, and wanting to serve a cause. And so what does a leader do? A leader tries to innovate constantly, builds teams, carries people along, and simply wants to make tomorrow better than it was today and yesterday. So in that sense, I think leadership is pretty agnostic. It doesn't really matter whether you're a man or a woman, you just want to be a leader. But I think what's very important is that each one of us, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, must want to aspire to be leaders, because it certainly makes for a better country and a better tomorrow. And that's my take on women leadership. So ICI was formed in 1949 by an Act of Parliament to regulate the profession of chartered accountancy. Now, what was the fundamental objective of the auditing profession? Is to provide reasonable assurance on the truth and fairness of financial statements, and of course a couple of other things that we do. But I think we've moved quite far from this concept of reasonable assurance. Public perception of what an auditor should be, what an auditor should do, seems to be defining our profession today more than what was the actual legislative intent and the concept of reasonable assurance. So wherever there's a failure, there's always somebody saying, oh, where's the auditor? But I think we come in pretty towards the end of the governance structure. It's a lot of elements that make up for corporate governance. I think ICI needs to work with every element of this ecosystem, whether it's the directors, the shareholders, the other regulators, to kind of insist that we are a part of this financial governance rather than the be-all and end-all of financial governance. I think that's very important, and that's a change that must happen. Well, as we speak today, the National Financial Reporting Authority has been constituted and it's here to stay. But I do recollect way back in 2016, there was intense discussion and debate on this concept of NAFRA, which anyway came out in the Companies Act 2013. And I do recollect I was part of a team that actually made representations to the SAF in the Parliament. But NAFRA anyway has happened currently today, and we do have another regulator. But what's very important is that ICI and NAFRA should work together to make things happen, to improve the financial and the auditing discipline in this country, rather than take adversarial positions. See, adversarial positions between regulators are not really very helpful, and ICI must work with NAFRA to make things better. So as we speak, the National Financial Reporting Authority has been constituted and it's here to stay. I do recollect way back in 2016, I was part of a team that from ICI, and we made some very meaningful representations on why the country possibly does not need another regulator. Having said this, and with acknowledging that NAFRA does exist today, I think two things are very important. One, both ICI and NAFRA should work within their respective domains to make things happen. And the second thing that I think is very important is, it doesn't really help for two regulators to take adversarial positions. So ICI must actually work with NAFRA. So as we speak, the National Financial Reporting Authority has been constituted. Way back in 2016, when I was part of the council, I do recollect that there were several intense discussions on whether the country needed another regulator. And we'd made some representations to the standing committee as well. But NAFRA has come and it's here to stay. And I think two things are very important. One, NAFRA and ICI should work within their respective domains to make things happen. That's very, very important. And the second thing is, it really doesn't help for two regulators to have adversarial positions. It's again very important that both ICAI and NAFRA collaborate to have a better system of financial governance in this country. So that's my take on NFRA. It's here and it's here to stay, so we need to work with them. Well, this has been the topic which has been a raging debate today because NAFRA has put out a consultation paper, and the paper seems to suggest that certain categories of companies, small and medium companies, can be exempted from audit. Now, as a profession, we are a little worried whether there is a loss of professional opportunity here. But I think what's at stake here is something much larger. The auditors really don't need audits. I think the country needs audits. And here's why. So, audits have been enshrined in the Companies Act because you have a corporate form of organization, and that should not be misused for a purpose other than for what it was intended, which is why you have audit enshrined in the law, in the Companies Act. So if somebody does not want to be subscribed to an audit, then he can choose a different form of organization rather than opt for a company. The second thing here is, if the government comes up and says, okay, we will exempt companies up to a certain threshold, certain turnover, etc. from audit, then what actually prevents somebody from creating multiple companies to escape this threshold? Nothing. It's quite possible that this provision can actually be gamed. The third sort of reason that I think is very relevant, or one argument that I'd like to put out, is there has been a dispensation in terms of income tax audit. Above a certain threshold is when you need an audit. GST audits have been done away with. So I think actually downsizing company audits is not really a good idea. ICAI must put forth very compelling arguments to make sure that these audits stay in national interest rather than in the interest of the auditing profession. So that's my take on small and medium company audits. So again, there's been a lot of talk now on whether we need to reduce audits so that somebody's ease of doing business will improve. Well, I really don't think so. I don't think there is any clear correlation between the two. On the contrary, I think audits actually help to improve the ease of doing business because a contractual counterparty has a far higher level of confidence when he is dealing with an entity which has been audited. The second thing that I'd like to say is, while on one hand we talk about ease of doing business, we now have a far more complex, a far more detailed Schedule 3, which a company is expected to comply with possibly in the future. So I see an inherent dichotomy here, and but what is really needed, I think, is a simpler set of accounting standards and auditing standards when we are dealing with small and medium companies. I think that would be far more effective. So that's my take on audits versus ease of doing business, and if at all, I think there is a positive correlation. My name is Sripriya K. I'm a chartered accountant. I passed out in 1996. I went to DAV High Secondary School and the Etiraj College for Women. I did my articles in Pricewaterhouse, Chennai, worked with Ford, and I was back with PW, and then went on to start a professional practice in 2001. I am a partner with a firm that's called SPR & Co. I specialize in risk and corporate laws largely, and I'm also an insolvency professional, a registered insolvency professional. I was very, very privileged to have served as a member of the Southern India Regional Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India between 2013 and 2016, and went on to be part of the Central Council as a member between 2016 and 2019. I'm a very, very avid reader, very, very fond of reading, particularly mythology. I'm an occasional blogger, active on social media, and I dream of a very, very happy and an ethical next generation. And I'd like to make a difference in whatever I do. I'm a parent, I'm also a pet parent, and that's about it. Way back in school, I was a school topper and an All India merit holder. Passed out to the DAV High Secondary School in Chennai. When I was in college, I was in the NCC, which was actually a life-changing moment for me when I joined the NCC and did about 3 years in the NCC. I was the best cadet and the parade commander for the Tamil Nadu, Pondicherry and Andaman contingent that went to the Republic Day camp 1992. I was placed All India second best cadet and was also sponsored by the Ministry of Defence to an exchange program to the United Kingdom. It was an 8-student team that went. Very, very fond memories of those days. Later on in my CA, I was placed All India 17th in my CA intermediate exams in 1994. And I was also the best lady candidate from the Eastern region where I was registered. Right now in 2021, I was very, very humbled to be included in a book that was called as The Nightingales of the CA Profession, where they profiled women chartered accountants, successful women chartered accountants across different streams and genres. So a very, very nice moment because it was written by 2 very, very eminent chartered accountants and I truly felt nice about it. I think I'm a fast learner, reasonably consistently demonstrated some ability to gain quick insights into situations. I have good interpersonal communication, presentation and negotiation skills. I'm a pretty decent orator. I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to share knowledge. I think number 1 would be whatever is worth doing well. The second, I think, particularly relevant in these pandemic times, it's very, very important to be helpful. If there's any way you can help somebody, even on something very small to something very large, I think it's important to go ahead and do it. 3, I think it's very, very important to be trustworthy and dependable all the time. But I think there's a far more compelling reason why I want to be in the Central Council. I think whatever I am today is because of ICAI and the tag of being a chartered accountant. And I think it's some time to give back to the profession which has given so much to me. And so I seek your support for my Central Council candidature. Well, I qualified as a chartered accountant in 1996 and makes it 25 years this year. I spent a few years in the industry after qualifying. I worked with Ford and with PwC and then I started a professional practice in 2001 as a sole proprietor. Managed to scale up. But during this entire stretch of 25 years, I've tried to stay abreast of all developments. And I think I understand the perceptions and requirements of the various stakeholders, whether it's members, whether it's students, whether it's ICAI itself as a regulatory body, or those connected, the regulators, the MCA, MOF, etc. I think that's one good reason why I think I'd like to serve in the Central Council once again. The second is perhaps a far more compelling reason, is I think whatever I am today is because of ICAI. A lot of what I do reflects on my bearing and it's essentially because I'm a chartered accountant. And in some sense, I think I need to give back something to my profession which has given so much to me. And that's one of the larger reasons why I seek to contest this election. Third reason is I've been here before. I've served in the Regional Council. I've also served in the Central Council. And to the best of my knowledge and capability, I think I've made some very, very decent contributions. Contributions that I seek to strengthen and further in my coming tenure. And so I seek your support for my candidature. Let me speak about knowledge sharing first. I think one of the most positive developments I have seen in the last decade in our professional fraternity is sharing knowledge. I'm part of many, many WhatsApp groups and mailing groups where I see people, sort of resolving other members' queries, etc., at lightning speed. And it's very, very nice to see this kind of a spirit of camaraderie within our profession to help each other. And I think I've been no exception. I'm just part of a larger group. So it was way back in 2012 that I decided, we had, as a firm, had some practices and repositories and kits. And we decided whatever we did for my practice, especially whatever I tried to write for my own firm, I would put it out in the public domain. And so starting, I think sometime in April 2012, I started sending out little bit of work that we had done, whether it was a bank audit program, a tax audit program, or updates on the Companies Act, GST audit programs, etc. So, and thus began the Smart CA initiative, and then the WhatsApp groups happened, and I'm very happy to let you know that I sort of mail out 10,000 people on and off whenever there's something important I feel that's changing, or there's something new that I've done. Having said all this, in this whole aspect of knowledge sharing and Smart CA, I must admit that I have been the biggest gainer. Whenever I wanted to, send out a knowledge update, then I would read so much more about it, whether it was on Schedule 3 or the changes to audit rules or accounting rules, whatever. And I'm very, very thankful again to my profession for having given me this opportunity. I think audit is expected today to be at the cutting edge of trust and integrity. So it's extremely important that we're able to fortify this public trust in ICAI and in all the work that we do. I think this would be a key agenda item for ICAI at 75. So there are many, many ways to fortify public trust, but I think I'd like to just cite two examples. One, can we as an organization go back and tell our stakeholders what the impact of audit has been? For example, an audit impact assessment of bank audits. Can we summarize and collate all the MOCs and then go tell somebody this is the thousands of crores that audit has made a difference to your financial reporting today? The second thing that we could possibly look at is whenever there's a failure, somebody says, okay, so where is the auditor? I think it's very unfair. Instead, ICAI can play a fairly proactive role in examining, putting out white papers on causes of failures, and to work with the government and the stakeholders to fortify the system to make sure that such failures don't happen. So I think these are just two examples of how we can build public trust, and something that I actively seek to help out in my future years. So another significant thing where I think ICAI at 75 might want to be is in terms of professional knowledge and training. Currently in the ICAI domain you have a plethora of content. I think all these needs to be relooked at in terms of pruning, etc. But that's fairly transactional. But what I think is of far more relevance is if ICAI can put out an audit software, checklists and repositories for all the work that's largely done by the SMP segment. That would be very, very beneficial. And coupled with this, if we are able to offer daily updates, the landscape is just changing dramatically and drastically every day. If we can come out with a solution to offer daily updates to all members, I think that would be greatly beneficial. And these are a few of my thoughts in the area of broadening professional knowledge and training. So what's the agenda for the future? ICAI at 75, new vision, new direction. My first pillar would be to broaden professional opportunities, and that would mean we ensure that there is no further downscaling of audits by the government. 2, offer intense support to members in mofussil areas. 3, explore newer avenues of professional work. 4, come up with structured flexi working options for women members, all of whom I think should continue in the pipeline to pursue their careers. The second pillar is to ensure that ICAI is capable of very strong policy advocacy. And what does that mean in terms of a strong policy advocacy? It means that we are able to liaise in all policy actions of the government. The second pillar that I reckon is very, very important is for ICAI to offer very, very strong policy advocacy to the country, which means we would need to liaise in all policy actions of the government and other regulators. We need to reiterate the need for CAs to head finance or accounting functions of public interest entities. This would also mean a lot to members in the industry. 3, we need to establish an ICAI Center for Policy Research. It's a very, very important and a very distinguished body within ICAI. Of course, we also need to work and come up with some good advocacy measures to enhance fee levels right across the profession. The third pillar that I'd like to envision is one of focused professional knowledge, training and scaling up of the profession. We have a darn good CPE mechanism, but I think it can be a lot more innovative, including short videos. We need to have clinics to enable scaling up of this profession. The Prime Minister dreams of very large Indian firms, and I think we should participate in that vision by enabling firms to scale up. We need to have comprehensive audit softwares, checklists for all audits and certifications, especially for SMPs. We need to have good train-the-trainer initiatives to build our CPE capability. The fourth pillar that I'd like to speak about is to reinforce public trust. How do we reinforce public trust? One, a data-driven proof of efficacy of bank and C&AG audits. Can we summarize all the MOCs and take it and say this is the contribution we've made? White papers on corporate failure and root cause of such failures. I think whatever we need to do, we need to re-establish the concept of reasonable assurance. That's very, very important. The fourth thing we need to do is to proactively address NAFRA and the related challenges we've been facing. The domains of ICAI and NAFRA need to be very, very clearly defined and demarcated so that there is no, sort of each one stepping over the other's domain. And the last agenda that I envision for ICAI is very sustained public and member service. We need to re-examine our disciplinary mechanism and the disciplinary body in toto. And I'd obviously sort of provide my inputs once I have a role to play. Two, ICAI would do very well to facilitate all new launches in future, especially after what has happened to the income tax portal. So it'll be very good if we can offer volunteer testing teams for any new launches of the government. We need to enhance and expedite our CABF process, especially for COVID-19 cases where I think many of our members have been affected as well. And of course, in the last but not the least, we need to ensure our new initiative, which is the SSP portal, has been very good, but we need to ensure that it's defect-free and more importantly, have an 18/7 member helpline for any SSP related queries. So these 5 pillars are what I envision to be my agenda for the future for ICAI at 75, new vision, new direction.